Great, so a very warm welcome to Brixton Buddhist Community's Dharma Day celebrations. My name is Virinaga, so I'm the chair of the Brixton Buddhist Community, and we're assembled here for the first time since the lockdown in Ephra Space, one of the venues we use, and I'm here with 11 other people. It's really lovely to see actual people in the Sangha, in the community, and I'm aware that quite a few of you may be tuning in from home as well, so very, very warm welcome to everybody. Good to be assembled here. And we're particularly here to celebrate Dharma Day, which is, of course, the day which the Buddha, or celebrates the day the Buddha started to communicate his spiritual understanding for the first time 2,500 years ago. But particularly for us as well, we're here to celebrate three people becoming mitras, or becoming friends of the Triratna Buddhist community. So Francis, Jack, and Laura are here today amongst the gathered members, and also friends and family as well. So a very warm welcome to you. And so what we'll be doing this afternoon is we'll be exploring some of the themes of spiritual commitment, embarking on a spiritual journey, with a talk from Parama Bandhu, who's the president of the Brixton Buddhist community, and then also some short talks from the Mitras to be as well, some short 5-minute talks on why they've decided to become Buddhists. And then we'll have a little break, a little tea break, as is normal in any Buddhist gathering, and then we'll come back for the actual Mitra ceremony, and so that will take place as part of a Sevenfold Puja, a normal Sevenfold Puja, with a few adaptations for the circumstances, where our three Mitras to be will make 3 ritual offerings in a very simple ceremony and become Mitras, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. So just say if you're tuning in from home and you'd like to say hi, do say so in the chat room, and I'll tell everyone that you're gathered and that you're here watching. So yeah, drop a comment in the chat box. I can see there's a few comments coming in, so I'll go through those in a minute. But just to say, I'm really excited to be doing this. It feels a bit like experimental, doesn't it, to be sort of gathered and also filming at the same time. So we'll just see how that goes. But I'm actually very excited that we can actually start to gather again as a Sangha, as a community, and I look forward to that unfolding. So let me just say a little bit about the theme. So the theme that we decided to talk about today was spiritual commitment, or rather Parama Bandhu offered that up as a theme that we could explore together. And for me, this is we're engaging wholeheartedly in our ideals, engaging wholeheartedly in spiritual practice. Of course, that goes in and out a bit, doesn't it? For all of us, I think it certainly goes in and out for me. The level of enthusiasm or inspiration or commitment I feel, but at the heart, I think there's somewhere there for me, kind of an aligning to a spiritual principle or a spiritual ideal, a direction to my life that I've decided to live by. And we all make those steps in different ways. So we've got some people becoming mitras here today. And for me, that was, becoming an ordained member of the Triratna Buddhist order. So I decided to wear my ordination robes today, as that felt like it was symbolic. So for me, these robes represent the time I took my own ordination vows, if you like. So the point in my life where I decided to commit a bit more. Of course, there are levels, aren't there? Levels of commitment that we go through. So just sort of exploring that. But also, really for me, I think there's something in also the story of the Buddha, where he decided he encountered challenges and difficulties. Realized that life didn't quite work in the way that people around him thought it should, and he made a commitment to seek out that truth. He went forth, undertook 8 years of practice and austerities in order to try to finally, went through a few dead ends, but finally realize a new way of existing, a new angle on life and living, and then subsequently spent the next 40 years teaching his path, teaching his what he'd discovered. So for me, that symbolises that sense of commitment. You always got the sense that he had this ideal and he embarked on that and committed to that, and that he wasn't above that himself, if you see what I mean. It said that he revered the Dharma, he revered the path, he revered the teaching. So he himself was in reverence to this, or committed, if you like, to this pathway. So anyway, so we'll just be exploring that. Obviously, we're all at different levels. We all commit to things at different times and places, don't we? But we'll just be exploring that spiritual principle over the course of today's live stream and ceremony. Okay, so let's just see who's tuned in, shall we? So, it's, get a sense that there's a bigger Sangha out there rather than just us 12 gathered here. So we've got a bunch of, a number tuning in. So we've got Kalpna, or Kay, as you may know. So very warm welcome to you, Kalpna. Lisa, Joe, Jill, Sangamani tuning in, Lizzie Lawrence, Anna Brown, Alina, Alex B and Geeta so far. They all say hi. So hopefully that gives us, I definitely feel, whenever I look at camera now, I get a sense of a Sangha out there, not just a bit of plastic, but it's really lovely to hear from people and that people are tuning in. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just start off really with a talk from Paramabandhu. So Paramabandhu is a very senior order member in the Triratna Buddhist order. He lives up at the London Buddhist Centre, and he's also the man who happened to ordain me as well. He's a very good friend of mine, someone I really look up to and respect, and he's also the president of the Brixton Buddhist community. So basically, if you like, he's a friend of our community. So although he's not around day to day, he's here to support us and look after us. And he very kindly offered to give us a short talk on Dharma Day and the significance of spiritual commitment. So let's watch or listen to Paramabandhu's short talk, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the evening.
So today we're celebrating Dharma Day, and what Dharma Day marks is the occasion after the Buddha's enlightenment when he first taught the Dharma, first communicated his experience in a way to somebody else so that they were able to understand, and they were, in fact, became enlightened like the Buddha. So it was the first occasion when the Dharma was transmitted. And then, of course, the Dharma has been transmitted down through the ages. And we're in that lineage right down now as we hear the Dharma. So throughout the Buddha's life, he entered into communication in this way, communicated the Dharma to many, many people. And he transmitted the Dharma. And what I'm going to do today is just look at one example of this communication and then try and look at what's the relevance got for us, and particularly in regards to the question of spiritual commitment. So we're going to look at somebody called Sundarika Bharadvaja. So we meet Sundarika Bharadvaja in a text called the Sutta Nipata, which is one of the older sections of the Pali Canon, and we find him on the bank of the river Sundarika, hence his name, Sundarika Bharadvaja. He was a Brahmin, and Bharadvaja, there are a number of Bharadvajas appear, and they appear to be quite a high-ranking family or clan of Brahmins. And when we meet Sundarika, we find him making a fire offering. He's doing a fire ritual. So he's offering milk rice to the fire, which is a way of making an offering to the gods, perhaps especially the god Brahma, but he's making offerings to the gods. And then he finds that he's got some of his offerings left over, and he wants to offer this milk rice to another Brahmin, because that will have a very good effect. It's said that a Brahmin was born from the mouth of Brahma, the god Brahma. So at this point, Sundarika sees the Buddha, but the Buddha actually has his head covered. He must have had his robe over his head, maybe to keep the mosquitoes off. And as Sundarika approaches him, he takes the robe off his head, and Sundarika discovers that this person has a shaved head. And his immediate thought is, oh no, it's a shaveling. So shaveling being a derogatory term for a wanderer with a shaved head. Most Brahmins didn't shave their head. However, Sundarika remembered that sometimes, occasionally, a Brahmin would shave the head. So he went up to the Buddha and asked him what his caste was. So the Brahmin being the highest of the four main castes at that time. And the Buddha said that he did not belong to any caste, that indeed he wandered in the world without any possessions and that he was fully calmed. So this seems to have slightly wrong-footed Sundarika. He didn't quite know how to respond, but he said, well, Brahmins like to ask other Brahmins if they're Brahmins, to find out. And then the Buddha responded to this by showing that he knew the Vedas being the sacred scriptures of the Brahmins at that time. And so that seems to reassure Sundarika, and he's clearly a bit interested in this person, and says, well, why do people make offerings to the gods? Because he's been making offerings to gods. Why do people do this? And the Buddha understands that he's wanting to know, basically, how can I make a successful offering? And so he says, well, you can make a successful offering if you offer it to a Veda master. So this implying someone who's a master of the Vedas. And Sundarika gets more interested, and he says, oh, I really love doing rituals. So how do I do this well? How do I do rituals well? So what the Buddha responds is, first of all, that you don't ask about caste. So that's quite interesting. You don't ask about caste. That actually what you must look for is somebody that is spiritually worthy, someone who's spiritually mature. And he then goes on to describe the qualities of a Buddha, so the qualities of someone who's spiritually mature. So let's just take a little pause in the story and have a little look at that. So here we have Sundarika, who's going about his life. He's clearly got some kind of feeling for the spiritual life, although in a sense he doesn't quite know what he's doing. Maybe this is just what he's been taught, that this is what you do these fire rituals, and he's getting on and doing it. He seems to have some kind of, should we say, prejudice about caste, about particular social grouping, and of course that's something that we're not unfamiliar with today. Caste continues as an issue in India, but also throughout the world. As we know, there are all sorts of different kind of prejudices according to particular social groupings or attributes. We could also say that perhaps Sundarika had something of an unexamined life at this point. He was just going on what he'd been taught, what he knew, doing this sort of fire ritual, following the tradition. And so in a way we could maybe think Sundarika is perhaps a little bit like us before perhaps we first came across the Dharma. Now, of course, how we come to the Dharma can be all sorts of ways. So it may be that actually we were already on some kind of spiritual quest and then we came across the Dharma. Or it may be that actually we were suffering in some form. It's very common that people find their way into the Dharma when originally they were suffering in some way. Maybe some difficult events had happened in your life, or maybe difficult mental states. So at the moment a lot of anxiety around, a lot of depression. So maybe something like that. Maybe we think, we want to learn something that will help with our mental states, maybe help us to learn to relax, and we come across the Dharma. Or maybe we just got some idea, we just want to have live a better kind of life. And again, we somehow come across the Dharma. Sometimes people just, a friend brings them along and they find out. However it happens, in this case, Sundarika meets the Buddha. And the Buddha very much tries to relate to Sundarika, to where he was at, although not completely on his own terms. So he refuses to enter into discussion about caste, but he does talk about the Vedas, which, as I said, were the sort of Brahminical scriptures at the times. But again, he actually redefines it. He redefines a Veda master, in effect, as one who's, well, in this case, a Buddha, but certainly one who's spiritually mature, not merely someone who knows those scriptures particularly well. So when we first meet the Dharma, often what happens is we come, for example, to a meditation class. As I said, maybe we wanted to learn to relax. Maybe we had some idea of self-development. And that's quite deliberate in a way that we teach something like meditation, often to new people, as a way of enabling people to connect to the Dharma, hopefully learning some useful skills, but also hopefully, at least in some cases, something more comes through, something more of the Dharma comes through. And in a way, we could say at this point, when we first meet the Dharma, it's like the beginnings of our spiritual commitment, in a sense. Our interest has been piqued, or in Sundarika's case, his interest was piqued in meeting the Buddha and sort of finding out what was going on there. And perhaps we could say that we start to look at our lives more fully. We start to examine our lives more fully. So we could say that this is just the very beginnings of spiritual commitment to the Dharma, when the Dharma first starts to have a bit of an effect on us and we start to move towards it, start to take a bit of interest. So let's have a look at what happens in the story next. So the Buddha continues to expand on the qualities of a Buddha, of an enlightened one, of a spiritually mature person. And then Sundarika has clearly responded and, wants to, respond to the Buddha and says, well, he now sees him, he sort of talks to him as Brahma made God manifest, like the God made manifest. And he said, let me offer to you as Brahma made manifest. And then the Buddha says, well, no, I don't accept food over which verses have been recited. So in other words, what's going on here is Sundarika is still thinking in terms of the verses recited, he's still thinking in terms of his own way of thinking, in terms of, the gods are the highest, and, well, if you can offer to someone who's a bit godlike, who's ideally a Brahmin, then that makes for like a really good offering, and this looks like a really good guy, so I'll make some offerings to him. So the Buddha won't accept it. And so, again, Sundarika asks him, well, who should I give gifts to? And again, the Buddha explains about the qualities of the Buddha. He explains it further. And this time, Sundarika seems to really understand. It's like it takes a while for it, he's got his original mindset of you make offerings, you say verses over them, and you offer them to the gods, and then this idea of, well, you've got some left over, you give it to another Brahmin. So he's got this whole patterning in his mind. And the Buddha's saying, no, leave all that. Leave the idea of caste behind. Leave the idea of offering to Brahmins. Leave the idea of making offerings to gods. What you need to do is find somebody who's spiritually mature. And these are the qualities And these are who you should, if you want to make offerings, these are who you should make offerings to. And this time, as I said, Sundarika responds, and he says, and I'll just read this to you, he says, "Excellent Master Gautama, excellent Master Gautama. Master Gautama has made the Dharma clear in many ways, as though he were turning upright what had been overturned, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, or holding up a lamp in the darkness, so those with good eyes could see forms. I go for refuge to Master Gautama, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha. May I receive the going forth under Master Gautama. May I receive the full ordination." So, as I said, Sundarika starts from his own frame of reference, but he gradually gets to understand the Buddha. He gets to see the Buddha's vision. And this moment of seeing the Buddha's vision, he describes as like something something that was overturned being set up the right way up, or like a lamp going on in the darkness, that the darkness is dispelled. So these are sort of metaphors of something suddenly becomes clear, and this seems to have what happened with Sundarika. And maybe that's, I don't know if you've had an experience, maybe you've had some kind of experience like that, when you saw the Dharma, or perhaps understood it really for the first time. I can certainly quite vividly remember on a retreat I went on after I'd been going along to the Buddhist Center for about a year. I went on a retreat, and there was a talk on meditation given by an order member called Vasantra that just particularly moved me. I was moved to tears by the talk, and it was at that moment that I realized I was a Buddhist. I'd not even been particularly thinking, am I not a Buddhist? But at that moment, I realized I was a Buddhist. There was something that really rang true in the Dharma. And again, it's often people say something like this, or a sense of coming home. That's another common way that people describe it. So it's at this point that we then commit to Buddhism. When we've seen something of the Buddha's vision, it's responded in our heart, and we want to respond back. So we commit ourselves. And in traditional language, that's talked in terms of going for refuge to the three jewels, the three precious things of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha as the personification, the ideal of the awakened mind, who in the case of Sundarika, he was fortunate to meet in person. And then the Dharma in terms of the teaching, in terms of the reality that the teachings point to, that the Buddha realized. And then the Sangha in terms of the spiritual community of those who are practicing the Dharma. So we use this language of going for refuge, that we're moving towards, we're taking our stand on, we're finding refuge in a positive sense in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And something like this happens when we become a mitra, at least at one level. So when we become a mitra, first of all, we feel we are a Buddhist. So a bit like the experience I described on the retreat with Vasantra. And we could see that in a way as, if you like, a sort of committing to the Buddha. There's something about the Buddha and his teaching that we've responded to. And then we want to practice the Dharma. That's the second part of becoming a mitra. We want to practice the Dharma, and particularly to practice the ethical precepts. So again, that in a way relates to going for refuge to the Dharma. We want to practice kindness, generosity, contentment, truthful speech, and mindfulness. And then we also say that we want to, as a mitra, practice in this tradition, in Triratna. We want to develop friendships in this tradition. So that is how we commit to the Sangha. Now, in Sundarika's time, there only was one Sangha. There was just the Buddha and his various disciples. Although there were other spiritual teachers around, quite a lot of other spiritual teachers around, but at the time in the life of the Buddha, there was just the Buddha and his immediate disciples. Now, in the 21st century, there are many different Buddhist Sanghas, and for our commitment to be effective, we need to place our heart in one particular Sangha. So we might want to, before becoming a Mitra, we might want to try out different Buddhist traditions. If we feel we're a Buddhist, we might want to try out different Buddhist traditions. It may even be a sensible thing to do. People vary in terms of how much they want to do that. But if we really want to commit, if we want to go deep in the Dharma, we need to find a particular Sangha. It's a bit like the analogy sometimes used of if you imagine a deep well, or if you imagine a whole set of deep wells, if we just put our bucket a bit of a way down each well, we're not going to get the water. We have to go all the way to the bottom of the well to find the water. And the reason for this is because different Sanghas will have slightly different approaches, will have different practices to some extent, even though there are often overlaps, will use language, or will use language in different ways. Even I've mentioned these terms, going for refuge, they're used differently in different Buddhist traditions, at least somewhat. And similarly, if we want to deepen our friendships, we need to be seeing the same people, but also we need to have a common approach so that we can communicate effectively with each other. So Sundarika, having said that he wanted to go for refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, he then asked for the going forth and the full ordination. So he wanted to completely reorientate his life towards being able to commit to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. And in a way, this is what happens when we make a spiritual commitment. There will be, at least to some extent, a reorientation of our life based on our new ideals. So in Sundarika's case, he wanted to change from a religious life based on making offerings to the gods, to committing to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and to go forth as a wanderer, as indeed many others did at that time. So the ideals come first, and then based on the ideals, we may decide to change our lives. We may reorientate our lives around our ideals. So Bhante used this aphorism, Bhante Sankarachita, of commitment being primary and lifestyle being secondary. So when we become a Mitra, as I said, the first thing is that we feel that we're a Buddhist. And in a way, that's like our sort of the primary thing, the primary commitment. But then that'll be reflected in some kind of changes in our behavior. So practicing the ethical precepts will be part of that. Becoming more involved with the Sangha. And we may want to change other circumstances, other aspects of our life. So we might want, for example, to change what work we do, for example. So the chair of Brixton Centre, Viryanaga, he used to be an academic, and then after committing to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, he changed his work to work for a Buddhist charity called Future Dharma, and then became the chair of the Brixton Centre. In my own life, I didn't change my work, so I continued working throughout my working life as a psychiatrist, Although I did make some changes, which I moved to working part-time so that I could free up more time for directly practicing the Dharma. Now, it's really important to understand that there's no shoulds or there's no compulsions about how we change our lives. It will very much depend on our individual circumstances and what we actually want to do. So in my case, I wanted to have more time to practice the Dharma, and I didn't want to give up my psychiatric work. So I found a way of combining them that worked for me. Similarly, if our changes to our life might include who we live with. So I've lived in a community with other Buddhists for many, many years, although within Triratna most Buddhists don't do that. It's a bit of a minority sport, but one that I really like. I made that decision because I wanted to spend more time with spiritual friends, have opportunity to develop spiritual friends more fully. So I think if we're thinking about making changes to our life as part of spiritual commitment, there's three things that we need to think about, three considerations. So first of all, if we're making a spiritual commitment, first of all, we want to make time for the Dharma, time for direct Dharma practice. So somehow we need to find time in our life to be able to meditate, ideally daily, if possible. We need to find time to study the Dharma. We need time to find time to spend with friends in the Dharma. It's not to say that we're necessarily getting rid of other friends, but it's a real boon to have friends who are practicing in the same way as you. And also, ideally, time to go on retreat as well, because retreat is such a wonderful opportunity to go deeper in the Dharma. Even if at the moment it might have to be a virtual retreat, but even that is good. The second thing is to recognize what supports you in the practice of the Dharma and what doesn't. And that might be the same thing for different people. So it's not like it's a one thing. So, again, coming back to the work example, you might be in a work situation that in some ways is quite difficult, but actually you can see that it's a real positive challenge. So it's a real spiritual opportunity. It's a real opportunity to develop qualities, spiritual qualities, to put your kindness and generosity into practice, to put the precepts into action. It might be that it's very stimulating, that it gives you more energy. And so in many ways, although perhaps challenging, it's a positive challenge and therefore supports your spiritual life, or that you can really practice in that situation. On the other hand, maybe it has a negative effect. Maybe you just find it very demoralizing or draining of your energy. And then maybe that suggests that these aren't great conditions, and maybe to be good to think about, if you can, changing them. And then the third thing is that if we decide to make changes, we need to decide to do that, or we need to do that in a careful, skillful way, in a sort of considered way. So we may have existing commitments that we can't easily change, and we need to, honour those commitments. And also, it's really worth recognising that there may be a degree of conflict in ourselves about making changes. Part of us wants to do it, and part of us doesn't want to do it. I just a little example. At one point, I was thinking of doing a higher degree, an MD, when I was training as a psychiatrist. When I was at work, I'd think, yeah, it's a really great idea, it'll really help my career, be really, really good. And then when I was at home with my Dharma friends, I even discussed it with them, but just being around them, I thought, you're off your head, Paramabandhu. It's the last thing you want to do. It'll just create a lot of time, and you're actually not really into it. In the end, I didn't do it, but there was definitely a degree of conflict, and sometimes that's what we can experience, is that there's a pull to the Dharma, but also a pull to something else as well. And in a way, we just need to hold that, and sometimes we just need to be quite patient and allow time to let things percolate and let's sit with them until we can feel ready to make a decision. So, spiritual commitment is really about turning towards the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, towards the three jewels. And it's a process. It's a process that starts with our first interest in Buddhism, in the Dharma, in the Buddha. And it's something that can deepen over time, and that may lead to, will lead to changes in our life. They may be more or less obvious and dramatic, but at least on some level, there are going to be changes in our life. And as I said, we need to go about that carefully, at the same time, remembering that if we really do want to commit, it does mean making changes. And ultimately, spiritual commitment is about moving towards the Buddha, becoming like the Buddha. So I just thought I'd just end the talk with some verses from the sutta, the Sundarika Bharadvaja Sutta, to describe some of the qualities that the Buddha described to Sundarika about who Sundarika should make offerings to. It's just to give us a little bit of a flavour of the Buddha, of the enlightened being, to end the talk. So I'll just read those. One in whom aggression has disappeared, whose mind is unsullied, who is freed from sensual desires, who has dispelled dullness. One who has conquered the passions, who understands birth and death. Such a one is a person of wisdom, the Muni. This person is worthy of offerings. Thank you.
Great. So yeah, really big thank you to Paramabandhu for giving us that talk. I really enjoyed that in a way. So nicely captured, I think, nicely summed up a bit about what commitment is. And I think he drew out the point that it's particularly personal, isn't it? The nature of commitment is a kind of movement within ourselves that is a kind of turning towards something that can't in a way be. It can't be kind of orchestrated by anybody else. It has to come from us, doesn't it? And, I sort of think of commitment as slightly unfashionable at the moment, or there's something in our culture that just means that there's so much out there, isn't there? We can sort of try things out. We can pick and mix our identity from all sorts of different things. And the idea of kind of just sticking with one thing is slightly counter-cultural now, isn't it? So I think, as someone who's made a commitment to a Buddhist group myself, I really actually value that, and I really gives me joy when I see others doing it, because I think there is treasures there, there are gems there, like Paramabandhu was saying. You have to dig down deep enough in one thing, and it's not like necessarily like this Buddhist group or that Buddhist group necessarily has the monopoly on the truth, but one has to stay somewhere long enough to really feel the benefit of something. So anyway, so for me that talk really summed up that there's a movement towards that, and of course hopefully our three mitras have been feeling mitras to be have been feeling something of that turning towards. Of course there are levels, aren't there? We go through our lives and hopefully turn towards more and more as we go, but so it's not like we have to be fully committed, but at least we need to respond to that calling. So we've got an opportunity now to hear from them, just 5 minutes each, to get a bit of a sense of, for them, what their turning towards or their reorientation was, what that moment was for them that made them want to ask to become a mitra. So we're going to have Francis up first. So if I can invite Francis to come up. And so I'll just ring a bell. We'll give you 5 minutes, Francis, and I'll just ring a bell gently if you just need to start wrapping up. But yeah, over to you.
So nice to see everyone. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to start at the beginning, which takes me back to my childhood. So I grew up in Bath, the middle child of 5, and my dad's side of the family is from Ireland, my mum's side from England, and they are both devout Catholics, both sides, and I was brought up as a Catholic. And I think both of those things, being in a big family and also being a Catholic, have been quite important parts of my identity as I was growing up. And yeah, I think I had a pretty happy childhood, and also just this real sense of spirituality being very central to that. So I can't really remember a time when it didn't feel like there was something bigger than us, this planet, and that there was always this kind of sense of this love being available to us. And I'm really grateful for that, actually, when I look back now. Although at the time, it did feel a bit, we felt a bit different. I felt a bit different, or my family was a bit different. And my parents were quite eccentric in some ways. We weren't allowed TV, and so we grew up reading a lot, but also with quite vivid imaginations, and we played lots of kind of very imaginative games, and that was, I think, a gift, but it did set me apart from my peers a bit, and that became, I think, as I grew older, like heading into being a teenager, that became, I think, something that made me feel a bit on the outside. And yeah, I think I found being a teenager quite hard. Often feeling kind of like a sense of separation or loneliness. And I think this also set me off on a kind of spiritual quest of my own. And so I hadn't really found any answers in my parents' church. And I really wanted something transformative. Like, I wasn't getting that from the Catholic Church. I just wanted to feel like a huge sense of love. And I just wanted my life to be turned around. And I used to kind of meditate, I guess, and pray and go into these quite like subtle but lovely states, but they weren't transformative enough for me. And I was looking kind of in more like evangelical Christian circles, and I wasn't finding what I needed there. It just didn't feel authentic, and it wasn't happening to me. I'd see people kind of going into states of ecstasy, and I'd be like, it's just not happening. I'm not feeling anything. So eventually, towards the end of my teenage years, I kind of just disregarded that and got my sense of belonging from kind of partying, drinking, boyfriends, that kind of thing, and it just didn't seem compatible with this spiritual quest. So going into my 20s, I just let that drop and actually, just embraced atheism. And I always, throughout my 20s, I still had this sense of wanting to do something good in the world, and my secular response was to turn to humanitarian aid work. So that became my career. And it was incredibly interesting. Like, I got to travel the world and see beautiful landscapes and meet incredible people. But I also encountered immense, I got to see face-to-face immense suffering and hardship and poverty. And that was also countered with kind of a hedonism and a weird aid worker party lifestyle. So just really a weird mix of things. And I think overlaid with kind of what I now kind of understand to be neo-colonialism and I guess, white supremacy as well. So just a real sense of being a bit lost and a bit misguided and separated from those kind of original values that I'd had growing up. And so I entered my 30s, I went back to London, and I was really, feeling quite lost and feeling the need to be more grounded. And it was at this stage that my elder sister had heard about the London Buddhist Centre, so we decided we'd go along together. So we went along and we enrolled in Buddhism and Meditation, which was led by Jan Barcher, and it just literally blew my mind. Like, I'd just never come across these concepts before at all. And yeah, I was encountering this teaching of reality that you'd never heard about, but just made lots of sense. And it made sense kind of rationally. And yeah, it made sense on a much deeper level. And I just felt in touch again with that kind of hope that I'd had as a kid, like something bigger, something wonderful. And yeah, the sense of reverence that I'd grown up with as well was also there. That was 7 years ago, so it's taken me a long time to get to this stage of committing. And those 7 years have been a bit of a dance between my kind of hedonism and, yeah, I think some of the things that were in the talk, like just not quite being able to let go of different things and social pressures. And but there's been a few things that have really helped me to commit. And one of them was, yeah, a couple of friends who have been on this journey with. And it's not quite emotional talking about it. And then, just take a breath. Whew. And yeah, my study group, I joined the Brixton Sangha a couple of years ago, and just having a group of women to, sorry, I knew tears would come. Yeah, being able to study with fellow women in this journey, and then last summer, sorry, just gonna breathe into that. Doing the Kavanagh appeal, actually, I found myself doing the appeal, and just having that really helped me with my commitment. I think it was very hard for me to reach that level of commitment, and just being in a mini Sangha every day for 6 weeks just really brought me face to face with myself, but also with the realization that this is how I want to, commit, and how I want to, the journey I want to be on, the path I want to be on. And yeah, I'm just really happy that I'm doing this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Yeah, thank you. I'll invite Jack up, and while Jack's just getting settled, I'll do a few shout-outs from the room. So quite a few people tuned in. So we've got Gina. Welcome, Gina. Nice to have you here. Sagrasila, Tasha, Simon, maybe it's Simon or Simop Harris. Amaladana's here. Rosie's here. Vajratara's here. And yeah, lots of rejoicings for the talk, and also, Francis' talk, Parambandu's talk as well. And yeah, and Graham as well. So yeah, nice to have you all here tuning in. You ready, Jack?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, take it away. I'll give you a bell after 5.
Cool.
Yep.
First of all, thanks, Francis. That was a very moving talk. Thank you, and congratulations. Okay, why am I a Buddhist? Well, when I was asked this question and tried to cull my thoughts together, the first thing that struck me was, what is a Buddhist? And there's lots of potential answers to this question, but the definition I'm going to go with for this short talk is to look at the stem of the word. So, it comes from Buddha, which means the awakened one. So, for me, being a Buddhist means holding the intention to wake up. I think we can all relate to this desire, whether we're Buddhist or not. You just need to look at some of the movies that we produce as a species. The Matrix, personal favourite of mine, The Truman Show, Inception. They all contain the message that freedom is there for the taking if we can just let go of our fear and wake up. And we love these films because on some level we know that we're living in a kind of matrix, or a kind of Truman Show, or a kind of dream. We're pushed and pulled around by forces that seem so real and so powerful, yet when we pull back the veil we can see, even if just very briefly, that they're actually fleeting and insubstantial. Sadly for us, unlike Neo, when we acknowledge the truth, we still spend most of our time in the matrix. And I'm sure everyone here has experienced either having a breakthrough in meditation or realizing something quite deeply about their personal ethics, only to find themselves once again having a petty argument with their partner, or falling into that same familiar cycle of craving and shame. So how do we deal with this push and pull? On the one hand, we know that we have the capacity to wake up, but the illusion persists. So for the time being, life is this kind of painful experience of like slipping in and out of this dream. Well, it turns out that there is 2,500 years of excellent literature on this exact subject. Of course, being truly modern individuals, we might feel that we can kind of carve our own path and ignore this tradition. But I've come to believe that this is like trying to learn an instrument without listening to any music. You'd probably get somewhere. You'd make a bit of progress, you kind of figure things out, but it'd be so slow and laborious, and there'd be so much guesswork and so many dead ends that you'd probably end up just giving up out of despair. So why not? Why not use this resource? Why not stand on the shoulders of giants? So at this point, I could finish my talk. I've got everything I need. I've got the goal to wake up, the Buddha, and I have more wisdom than I could ever get around to reading, which is the Dharma. So why not stop there? Well, at risk of labouring the metaphor, Neo doesn't leave the Matrix all by himself. Yes, he has an inkling that something's not quite right, but without Morpheus and Trinity, of course, he inevitably would have slipped back into complacency and his curiosity would have petered out. And this would be a tragedy, as anyone who's seen the film knows. In my experience, the simple act of stepping into a community of people who are trying to wake up has been as revolutionary as the notion of waking up itself. Not only has my own practice deepened, but I've connected with humanity in a completely new way. And my heart truly fills up with gratitude and love when I think about all the people in the Sangha who have shared their moments of insight and pain with me. So I'd like to take my final moment to thank you all, my teachers, my outstanding study group, and everyone else who I've crossed paths with on the way here. This fellowship, this community, this Sangha, truly is, in the words of the Taratnavandana, an incomparable source of goodness to the world.
Thank you, Jack. Yes, all the more impressive that you are a musician, so that metaphor of learning the instrument, I think, has a bit more weight.
Which I tried to do for many years.
Great, no, thank you for that. So let's invite Laura up. Invite you to take your seat. And much appreciation for your talk so far, both Francis and Jack as well in the chat room. So over to you, Laura, when you're ready.
Thank you. A bit hard act to follow, Francis and Jack. And also, I think, just reflecting on the talk from Paramabandhu, I think there's quite a bit that I feel like I've written down in my talk from what he said, and quite a bit from similar to Francis. Our journeys have been somewhat similar. I guess a bit of background really. So, as you can maybe tell from my accent, I'm not from London. I grew up in the north of England, in East Lancashire actually, in the northwest, in a place called Accrington, which is known for many other things if you're from the UK, but that was in around the 80s and 90s, and I think, similar to Francis, I had a very happy home life with mum, dad and a brother. We were part of a Church of England community, and we went to lots of different things at the church, so Sunday school, etc. It feels like an awful long time ago now, but yeah, I still have fond memories of walking days and Christmas services, and you know, all sorts of dressed up as all sorts of different things, sheep and things like that. So I did, similar to Francis, I grew up with a sense of something that was bigger, but at the time, I think at a young age, I didn't really know what that was, but I just had a sense that there was something, there were bigger truths in the world, but I couldn't really kind of understand how that connected to my life. So I suppose this linear thing that I'm describing, I suppose, I didn't continue to attend church or as a teenager or in my 20s, and I was quite disconnected from any kind of spiritual practice, so you know, just got into the detail and the grit of A-levels and university, so I wasn't really connected. Until I think my early 30s, and I think when I think back about that time, I think that was quite a time of quite a lot of insecurity and sort of failure to launch. There was not much going on from a spiritual perspective. Lots of other things, but nothing from a spiritual perspective. But something persisted, I think, and from the age of about 26, I started a career in international social justice work, so a bit similar to Francis. I guess out of a desire to contribute to ending suffering in the world, although with hindsight, lots and lots of hindsight, I really now have come to understand how narrow and naive my understanding of what suffering actually was at the time. So this took me to Thailand, where I worked for VSO, Voluntary Services Overseas, as some of you might know. I was a programme advisor for them. And it was at that point when I actually started to meditate. So as many of you might know, there's a lot of Buddhist traditions in Southeast Asia, and I was quite keen to kind of find out a bit more about that. So I did learn to meditate regularly, and in a similar way to Paramabandhu was talking, I sort of shopped around, although that's a terrible expression, but like I kind of did kind of see what was out there because I didn't know anything about it. So I went on retreats with Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist. I also did Theravada tradition retreats as well. I think one of the things that struck me, having done quite a few retreats, was the immediate feedback that I got. Quite a few people were saying, oh, you seem really confident now, and you seem like really calm and self-assured, and I actually could feel that in myself. So there was some immediate feedback, which was just amazing at the time. So it started something, it started the kind of gem of something. I moved back to the UK in about 2009, and my curiosity continued. I continued meditating, and I had a growing interest in the Dharma, but there hadn't been a lot on the retreats about the Dharma. It was quite difficult to navigate. Ironically, in Southeast Asia, I found it quite difficult to navigate. And I think I was looking for a spiritual link between myself, meditation, and the world, because I was still working in international development when I came back. So I still couldn't see the connection between all those things. So in the 10 years since I've been back, I've been on all sorts of retreats, all sorts of different themes. I found it a bit fragmentary though, and was missing a consistency of practice and connection to other people practicing. I did learn a lot about the Dharma on the retreats, and I could see how it was changing my mind and my heart and the decisions that I was making. It was also bringing into sharp relief some really uncomfortable realisations though about my work, and about my motivations for what I was doing and my privileges, and a real lack of understanding of structural inequality. So I think deepening my awareness really helped to kind of like sharpen my values and my focus. I now work on gender equality and women's rights, as some of you in the room know, and I'm really inspired by that area. It took a lot of kind of reflection on why I wanted to work on that area. But really, because I could have worked on all sorts of other things, but actually I'm inspired by gender equality because I feel a resonance being a woman myself, who's also been impacted by gender equality and the conditioning of society. Of what being a woman is, and working in this area just gives a bigger exploration field for that. Of course, it's very challenging to work in that area. There's lots of pushback, and there's never enough funding, and it's difficult to work at a distance with partners. But I continue to be inspired by the women that we work with, who are just really amazing. So I guess that was the bomb, wasn't it?
That was, yeah.
I thought it was just noise in my head. So I think it was a big jigsaw puzzle, essentially. So I joined the Brixton Sangha in 2018, and again, as Paramabandhu was saying, I think it was finally a case of like landing with one thing in one place with a set of people. And I started to have a stronger meditation practice, discuss the Dharma with other people, and I could really see spiritual friendship developing, which was really important. So I want to take this step to become a mitra, as I'm inspired by the teachings of the Buddha, and particularly his example of compassion for the people, loving kindness and generosity. And I can see the interconnected link between personal transformation for myself and the transformation of the world. So understanding and seeing this has created a critical link, which was missing, I think, for me, and sort of connects everything together. So it connects myself with the world that we're in, which I'm still trying to contribute to. So I think becoming a mitra will help me deepen my practice of the teachings and make a positive impact in the world.
Thank you, Laura. Great. I mean, I really love to hear people's stories in a way. It just makes it feel a bit more real, doesn't it, in a way? You know, so really good to hear from all three of you about your different inspirations and motivations for taking this step. So there's also, so you three are taking a step today. I just want to also recognise another person who's decided to take a step. So many of you all know Daisy May. She's been in our community for some time. So it's really delightful to just announce that Daisy May has asked for ordination. So she's asked to train to become an order member and join the True Young Buddhist Order. So sadhu to you as well, Daisy. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to start to bring this first half to a close. I have a couple of things I want to do first. I want to do a few thanks. Obviously, this temporary Buddhist centre didn't materialise as if by magic. It was down to really a lot of the hard work of Matranara and also Charlotte as well. So I just want to thank you two for putting everything like this together. And also, you won't be able to quite see, but Adam is behind the tech. He's been working extremely hard to make sure all of our technology works for the live stream. So I just want to thank you as well, Adam. Great. And before we take a break, I just also want to do, we do a Dharma appeal at all times. So I just want to, particularly for you guys at home as well, just to let you know that we're just going back to our physical classes, but we've been completely reliant on online donations for all of these activities as well. So each month we need to raise £2,000 to keep all of our activities going. So last month we raised actually 2,400 out of the generosity of the people in the community. So thank you, sadhu, to all of you guys for giving. But also we just need to keep on raising that money as well. So I believe we've already got I think we have around £700 a month of monthly gifts now. So there's a little bit more to go. I think we've got £900 so far this month already, only a week in, so that's very good. So if you do feel moved to give, then I'm sure Adam will post the link in the description for you to go to our donate page and think about giving. So that just helps to keep all these activities running and helps us to put on more events like this and help people take these sorts of steps that they want to. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this part to a close now. So what we'll do is we'll take a 15-minute break. So for the people here, we can have a break. For you tuning in at home, we'll end this live stream and there'll be a second live stream that you can find on our YouTube channel. So if you come back in 15 minutes time, we'll set off on the second part of the evening. So come back for 6:20, we'll start the second stream. Okay, bye for now. See you shortly.